A millionaire decided to test his fiancée's love by pretending to be bankrupt. Her reaction left him speechless. Part 2. Before Grayson could say another word, Seraphina grabbed her bag and stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing through the mansion. The door slammed behind her, the sound reverberating like a final note of accusation. Grayson stood frozen, his heart aching as the realization of what he had just done sank in. He had let his insecurities and doubts destroy the trust that had once been the foundation of their love. He sank into the sofa, his head in his hands, as guilt suffocated him. What have I done? Meanwhile, Seraphina walked briskly through the cold streets of New York, hugging herself tightly against the biting wind. Her tears fell unchecked, hot and stinging against her cold cheeks. But it wasn't just the wind that made her shiver. It was the ache in her heart. The pain of knowing that the man she loved had lost faith in her. She stumbled into a nearby cafe, seeking refuge from the cold and a moment to catch her breath. Her mind was spinning, replaying the confrontation over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. How could he accuse her of something so terrible? How could he look at her with so much suspicion and distrust? Sinking into a chair in the far corner of the cafe, Seraphina ordered a coffee, though she didn't touch it when it arrived. She stared at the steaming cup, her hands trembling as she wiped away her tears with a crumpled handkerchief. Grayson had always been her safe place, her rock, but today he had looked at her as if she were a stranger he couldn't trust. Her heart broke all over again as she realized just how deeply his doubt had cut her. Lost in her pain, Seraphina didn't notice Lucian walk into the cafe, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her tear-streaked face. A slow, satisfied smile curled at the corners of his mouth, though he quickly erased it, replacing it with a look of concern. He had been waiting for this moment, anticipating the fallout of the seeds of doubt he had so carefully planted in Grayson's mind. But seeing Seraphina alone, vulnerable and broken, it was the perfect opportunity to tighten his grip on the situation. Putting on his most sympathetic expression, Lucian approached her slowly, his voice gentle and soft. "Seraphina?" She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, her guard momentarily down. "Lucian?" His face was the picture of concern, his brows knitted together as he took in her tear-stained cheeks. "Are you okay? What happened?" Seraphina hesitated, her instinct telling her to protect her pain, to keep it close to her heart. But Lucian's voice was so gentle, his eyes so kind, and she felt so alone. She looked down, her fingers nervously twisting the handkerchief. No, I'm not okay." Lucian pulled out a chair and sat across from her, leaning in just enough to show his undivided attention. "You can talk to me," he said, his voice soft and warm. "Whatever it is, I'm here for you." Seraphina's resolve broke, the weight of her pain too much to bear alone. She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with fresh tears. "It's Grayson. He thinks I'm cheating on him." Lucian's eyes widened in feigned shock, his mouth dropping open just enough to look genuinely surprised. "Cheating? Huh? That's ridiculous. How could he even think that? You love him." "I know," Seraphina choked out, her voice breaking. "I've done everything I can to show him how much I love him, how committed I am, but he doesn't believe me. He followed me, Lucian. He spied on me and accused me of things I would never do." Lucian shook his head slowly, his expression one of deep sympathy. "I can't believe he'd do that, after everything you've been through together. It's like he's a different person," she whispered, her shoulders shaking as she fought to control her tears. "I don't understand it. I don't understand how he could look at me and not trust me." Lucian's eyes softened, his voice dropping to a comforting murmur. "I'm so sorry, Seraphina. I wish I could make it better." He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently placed it over hers. "You deserve better than this. You deserve someone who trusts you, who believes in you no matter what." Seraphina's chest tightened, her emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. "I thought that was Grayson. I thought we were stronger than this." "It's not your fault," Lucian insisted, his voice firm. "You didn't do anything wrong. If Grayson can't see that, then maybe he's not the man you thought he was." His words cut through her, her heart breaking all over again. She shook her head, her voice trembling. No, he's a good man, I know he is, but he's lost. I don't know how to bring him back. Lucian's eyes gleamed with a dangerous intensity, his voice deceptively gentle. Maybe it's not your job to fix him, Seraphina. Maybe you need to focus on yourself for once, on what makes you happy. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. I don't know how to do that, not without him. Lucian's hand tightened around hers, his eyes locking onto hers with a fierce determination. Then let me help you. You're not alone, Seraphina. I'm here, whenever you need me. Seraphina's heart ached, her emotions raw and bleeding, but Lucian's presence felt like a lifeline, his words wrapping around her like a warm blanket. She leaned into his comfort, her walls crumbling as she allowed herself to feel the pain. Meanwhile, Lucian's mind raced, his plan unfolding perfectly. He had created the distance between them, twisted Grayson's insecurities into weapons of destruction, and now, here was Seraphina, vulnerable and broken, seeking solace from the very man who had orchestrated her heartache. He knew he had to play his part carefully, to be the perfect friend, the unwavering support she needed. And in time, when her heart was fragile and her trust in Grayson shattered, Lucian would be there to pick up the pieces. Because Seraphina was too precious to lose, and he would do whatever it took to make her his, even if it meant destroying Grayson in the process. I'm sorry about that, Seraphina, Lucian said, his voice soft, deliberately soothing. You deserve so much more. You deserve someone who sees your worth and trusts you without a shadow of doubt. Seraphina looked up, her eyes red and swollen, her expression a mixture of surprise and exhaustion. She opened her mouth to reply, but quickly closed it, her emotions too raw, her mind too overwhelmed to form words. Lucian watched her closely, his eyes sharp and calculating despite the mask of concern he wore. He could see the cracks in her resolve, the vulnerability etched in every tear-stained line on her face. He knew this was his chance, but he also knew he had to be careful. He couldn't push her too hard, not yet. He softened his expression, his shoulders slumping just enough to appear genuinely empathetic. Listen, he murmured, his voice a gentle whisper. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who'll just listen, I'm here. You're not alone, Seraphina. Remember that. She nodded weakly, her gaze falling back to her untouched coffee. Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the rim of the cup, her thoughts swirling in chaotic circles. Lucian watched her in silence, his patience unwavering. He ordered a coffee for himself, making no further attempt to fill the quiet. He knew she was processing everything, replaying every accusation, every hurtful word Grayson had thrown at her, and that was exactly what he wanted. When the waitress brought his coffee, Lucian leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, casual, but his eyes never left Seraphina's face. He watched the way her brows knitted together, the way her shoulders sagged under the weight of her sorrow. She was breaking, piece by piece, and it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. After several long moments, he leaned in, his voice low, his tone laced with tenderness. I hate seeing you like this, Seraphina. You're an incredible person. You don't deserve this pain. He reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against her hair, his touch gentle, almost affectionate. It was a calculated move. Close enough to seem comforting, but just distant enough not to be invasive. For a brief moment, Seraphina allowed herself to accept the comfort. She closed her eyes, her shoulders relaxing under his touch. But then something shifted inside her, a flicker of discomfort, of realization. Lucian was too close, too familiar. Her eyes snapped open and she quickly straightened her posture, leaning away from him. Thank you, Lucian, but I'm fine. Her voice was soft but firm, a polite rejection. Lucian's jaw tightened, his frustration flaring beneath his carefully composed mask. But he forced himself to smile, backing off just enough to maintain his facade of respectfulness. He couldn't afford to scare her away, not when she was so close to breaking. I know you're strong, Seraphina, he replied, his voice warm, his smile gentle. But even the strongest people need someone to lean on sometimes, and I want to be that person for you, if you'll let me. Seraphina's shoulders slumped, her eyes glistening with fresh tears. She looked at him, her lips trembling as she spoke. Can you believe Grayson thinks I'm with him for his money? Lucian's heart leapt, his pulse quickening with excitement. He had known Grayson's insecurity would lead him to this point, but hearing it confirmed by Seraphina herself was more satisfying than he had imagined. He schooled his features, masking his triumph beneath a look of sympathetic disbelief. What? He exclaimed, his brows furrowing in genuine-seeming shock. He actually thinks that? Seraphina nodded, her voice breaking as she continued. He thinks I was only with him because he's rich, and now that he believes he's lost everything, he thinks I'm going to abandon him. Her words dissolved into a choked sob, her shoulders trembling. Lucian leaned in, his voice dropping to a gentle murmur. That's insane, Seraphina. I know you. I've seen the way you look at him, the way you light up when he's around. You love him. Seraphina looked up, her eyes shimmering with pain. I do. I love him with everything I have, but he doesn't believe me. He doesn't see me. He just sees some gold digger who's waiting to run off the moment things get tough. Her voice broke again, her fingers trembling as she wiped at her tears. I thought he knew me. I thought he trusted me, but he doesn't. He never did. Lucian leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he watched her spiral deeper into despair. He could see her spirit breaking, her love for Grayson fracturing under the weight of betrayal and doubt. He knew he had to play his next move carefully. He couldn't outright condemn Grayson, not yet. He had to be subtle, to let her reach her own conclusions. I don't understand it, he said, his voice laced with sadness. I mean, if he really loved you, wouldn't he trust you? Wouldn't he believe in your love no matter what? Seraphina's breath hitched, her face paling as his words hit their mark. That's what I thought too, but he didn't. He followed me, Lucian. He spied on me, accused me of the worst possible thing, and he never even asked me what was really happening. Lucian clenched his jaw, feigning anger. That's not right, Seraphina. You deserve better than that. You deserve someone who sees you for who you truly are, who trusts you without question. Grayson, if he can't see how lucky he is to have you, then maybe he never deserved you in the first place. Seraphina looked down, her tears falling into her untouched coffee. Her shoulders shook, her heart breaking beneath the weight of her shattered trust. I thought we were forever, but now, I don't know if we can ever get past this. Lucian leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. I know it hurts, but you're stronger than you think, and you're not alone. I'm here for you, whatever you need. His voice was tender, his gaze unwavering, and as Seraphina looked at him, her resolve faltered. She felt her heart cracking, her pain too raw, too deep to bear alone. She looked away, her body shaking as she fought to keep from falling apart, and Lucian watched her, his expression soft and sympathetic. But inside he was celebrating. She was breaking. She was losing faith in Grayson, in the love they had shared, and he was right there, ready to catch her when she finally fell. Because once she lost trust in Grayson, she would have no one else to turn to. No one but him. Lucian hesitated just long enough to make his next words seem reluctant, his face a perfect mask of concern and sincerity. Inside, however, his heart was racing with excitement. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the perfect opportunity to tear apart what remained of Grayson and Seraphina's relationship. He leaned forward, his hands gently clasping hers, his voice low and measured. Seraphina, I need to tell you something that I never wanted to say, but I care about you too much to let you suffer like this. You deserve to know the truth, even if it hurts. Seraphina's eyes widened, confusion and apprehension flickering across her tear-streaked face. What are you talking about? Lucian took a deep breath, letting his shoulders slump as if he were burdened by the weight of the truth. He made sure his hesitation seemed genuine, his eyes softening with feigned sympathy. Grayson is not bankrupt. Seraphina's face fell, her brows knitting together. What? What do you mean he's not bankrupt? That doesn't make any sense. Lucian held her gaze, his eyes never wavering as he tightened his grip on her hands, his fingers warm and comforting. I know it sounds crazy, but his bankruptcy was a lie. It was a plan, a test. He wanted to see if you were with him for love or for his money. He did it to make sure you were the one before marrying you. Seraphina went completely still, her body rigid as his words sank in. She looked at him, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. The world seemed to spin around her, everything blurring as realization struck. Her lips trembled, her voice breaking. You're saying this was all a lie? Lucian nodded, his expression pained, as if he were hurting for her. Yes, he orchestrated the whole thing. He thought he was doing the right thing, that it would prove your love was genuine, but he didn't realize how much it would hurt you. He didn't see how unfair it was, how cruel. The cafe felt colder, the walls closing in around Seraphina as her mind raced. Her heart thudded painfully, her chest tightening as she struggled to breathe. She thought back to every tearful night, every word of reassurance she had given him, every plan she had made to help him rebuild. It was all built on a lie. Her hands shook as she pulled them away from Lucian's, her fingers pressing against her mouth as she tried to suppress a sob. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different. Hot, angry, and filled with betrayal. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hollow. "Why would he do that to me?" Lucian's heart pounded with triumph, but his face remained solemn, his voice gentle. He was scared, Seraphina. He was afraid of being used, of being loved for his money. He thought this would give him peace of mind, that it would protect him from getting hurt. He paused, letting his words linger before adding softly, "But in trying to protect himself, he ended up hurting the one person who truly loved him." Seraphina let out a choked sob, her body trembling as she buried her face in her hands. He didn't trust me. He didn't believe in us and what we had. He thought I was just... Her voice cracked, the words too painful to say. "A gold digger?" Lucian finished quietly, his voice laced with false sorrow. "He thought you were just with him for his money, that if he lost it all you'd leave him." Seraphina's shoulders shook, her tears flowing freely. But, I never cared about the money. I just wanted him. I just loved him." Lucian leaned in, his voice low and comforting. "I know that. I've always known that. But Grayson, he let his fears control him. He let his insecurities ruin the best thing he ever had." She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen, her face contorted with pain. How? How could he do this to me? How could he lie to me like this? How could he not see that I was on his side? Lucian's eyes softened, his hand moving to rest on her shoulder. Because he was blinded by his own doubts. He couldn't see how lucky he was. He didn't trust you, Seraphina, and no relationship can survive without trust. Seraphina flinched, her body folding in on itself as the truth tore through her. No, it can't," she whispered, her voice shaking. I can't be with someone who doesn't trust me, who doesn't believe in me." Lucian's heart soared, his fingers tightening on her shoulder as he gently pulled her closer. "Then don't go back tonight," he said softly, his voice warm and persuasive. "Don't let him hurt you anymore. Let him sit with what he's done. Let him realize what he's lost." Seraphina's eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. But where would I go? I don't know where to go." Lucian's expression softened, his lips curving into a kind smile. "Come with me. Stay at my place tonight. I have a guest room. You'll be comfortable there, just until you figure out what you want to do next." Seraphina looked at him, her eyes full of fear and uncertainty. I don't want to be alone tonight." Lucian's heart raced, victory blooming inside him as he nodded, his voice warm and steady. "You won't be. I'll be there for you. I'll take care of you, like you deserve." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, her trust in him growing as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. She nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging as she whispered, Okay, I'll go with you." Lucian smiled, his expression tender as he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I promise, you're safe with me." He held her as she wept, his hand stroking her hair as he whispered words of comfort. But inside, his mind was already racing ahead, planning his next move. He had shattered her trust in Grayson. Now, all he had to do was make her trust him. Once she did, he would finally have her, and Grayson would lose everything. "Come to my place, just for today," Lucian urged, his voice warm and inviting, his eyes filled with feigned sincerity. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just rest, clear your head, have some peace. I promise I won't bother you. I just don't want you to be alone after everything that's happened." Seraphina hesitated, her heart aching, her mind spinning with confusion and pain. Every thought led back to Grayson, to the lie, to the betrayal. She felt like she was drowning, struggling to keep her head above water. And Lucian seemed like a lifeline, a safe harbor from the storm. But something inside her was hesitant, a quiet whisper of caution. She looked at him, his face full of concern, his posture open and non-threatening. He seemed so sincere, so caring. And right now, she needed someone to care. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. I just don't know." Lucian leaned in, his gaze steady, his smile gentle. "Trust me, Seraphina. I just want to help you. You deserve some peace after all of this." His words were so tender, so genuine, that she felt her defenses crumbling. She was tired, so tired of hurting, of feeling lost and betrayed. She needed a place to breathe, to think, to figure out what to do next. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just for today." Lucian's heart raced with triumph, but his face remained soft, his smile warm and understanding. "Of course, just for today. You'll be safe with me, I promise." He stood up, his movement smooth and reassuring as he went to pay the bill. "Come on," he said, offering her his hand as she slowly stood up. "I'll take care of you, Seraphina. I promise." Seraphina allowed him to guide her out of the cafe, her body moving mechanically, her mind numb with shock and exhaustion. She didn't have the strength to resist, didn't have the will to question his intentions. She was too broken, too lost. As they stepped outside, the cold New York wind hit her face, sharp and biting, a harsh reminder of the reality she was trying to escape. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself as she walked down the street, her thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and pain. Each step felt heavy, her heart aching with every breath. She could still hear Grayson's voice, still see the accusation in his eyes, the anger, the distrust. It replayed over and over, a relentless loop that made her chest tighten. She felt sick, her stomach twisting as the realization hit her again. Grayson didn't trust her. He never had. Everything they had built, every word of love, every promise, it was all built on a foundation of doubt and lies. Lucian followed her closely, his hand hovering near her back as if to steady her. His eyes were sharp, calculating, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He was so close to having her, to destroying Grayson once and for all. But then, Seraphina stopped. She turned to face him, her eyes still glistening with tears, but now filled with a cold resolve. "Lucian, thank you, but I need some time alone." Lucian's heart skipped a beat, panic flickering in his chest. "Seraphina, wait," he said quickly, his hand reaching out to touch her shoulder. "You're hurting. You're vulnerable. You shouldn't be alone right now. Please, let me help you." Seraphina took a step back, her shoulders stiffening. "I don't need help," she said, her voice low and steady. "I need space. I need to think, alone." Lucian's expression faltered, his smile slipping as he tried to contain his frustration. "Are you sure? You don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you." She looked at him, her eyes hardening. "I appreciate your concern, Lucian, but this is between me and Grayson. I need to figure this out on my own." Without giving him a chance to argue, she turned on her heel and walked away, her steps quick and determined. Lucian watched her go, his heart pounding with fury as she disappeared around the corner, out of his reach. He clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as anger surged through him. He had been so close to pulling her into his arms, to comforting her, to making her his. But she had slipped away right at the last moment. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the empty street. She was right there. I almost had her. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down, to regain control. He couldn't afford to lose his composure, not now. He needed to think, to adapt. "All right, Seraphina," he whispered, his voice low and cold. "You want space? I'll give you space. But this isn't over, not by a long shot." He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly as he composed a message to Grayson. "You deserve to know. Seraphina's hurting. I think she might do something drastic. Maybe you should check on her." He hit send, a slow, calculated smile curling at his lips. He knew Grayson would panic, that his guilt would drive him to chase after her, to try and make things right. And when Grayson confronted her, when the lies and the accusations collided, everything would fall apart. "Checkmate," he murmured, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You can't win, Grayson. Not this time." With one last glance at the corner where Seraphina had disappeared, Lucian turned and walked away, his steps light and confident. This was far from over. It was only just beginning. Picking up his cell phone, Lucian dialed Grayson's number with practiced ease, his face a carefully constructed mask of concern. Inside, however, his heart was racing, his mind already calculating the exact words to twist the knife deeper into Grayson's heart. Grayson answered on the second ring, his voice tense and anxious. "Lucian, did you find her? Is she okay?" Lucian closed his eyes for effect, letting out a slow, calculated sigh, as if the weight of the situation was bearing down on him. "Yeah, I ran into Seraphina, by chance, at a cafe. She was in a bad state, man. Completely devastated." Grayson's breath caught, panic flooding his voice. "Is she hurt? What happened? Did she say anything?" Lucian's face twisted into a mockery of sorrow, his tone soft and heavy with fake sympathy. "She knows, Grayson. She knows about the bankruptcy, about the test. She knows everything." A beat of silence followed, heavy and suffocating. When Grayson finally spoke, his voice was broken, barely a whisper. She knows? How? How did she find out?" "I don't know," Lucian replied, his tone carefully measured. "She didn't say how. But she's hurt, Will. She feels betrayed. She kept saying that you didn't trust her, that you tested her love instead of believing in it." Grayson's heart shattered, his knees buckling as he sank into a chair, his hands shaking. I never meant to hurt her. I just needed to know. I needed to be sure." Lucian closed his eyes, pretending to share his pain, even as a slow, satisfied smile curled at the corners of his lips. "I know, man. I tried to explain that to her, but she's really angry. She feels betrayed, like you never believed in her." "I need to find her," Grayson said, his voice trembling with urgency. "I need to explain, to make her understand why I did it. I was wrong, I know that now, but I can't lose her, Lucian. I can't." Lucian's eyes gleamed with triumph, but his voice remained steady, his tone firm. "I get that, Will, but I don't think that's a good idea right now. She's not ready to see you again." Grayson felt the world tilt beneath him, his chest tightening, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She said that?" "Yeah," Lucian murmured, his voice low and grave. "She's hurt, Will. She said she's tired of being tested, of having to prove herself. She feels like you never really trusted her, that you never saw her for who she is." The words hit Grayson like a punch to the gut, his heart shattering as the truth sunk in. No, that's not true. I trusted her, I loved her, His voice broke, a choked sob escaping his lips. I just didn't want to lose her." "I know, man," Lucian whispered, his voice soft, almost soothing. "I know, but she doesn't see it that way. She feels betrayed, and right now, she's too angry to listen." Grayson ran a trembling hand through his hair, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. I have to fix this. I can't just let her go, Lucian. I can't. I love her. I love her so much." "I know you do," Lucian replied, his voice heavy with false sympathy. "But if you push now, if you go after her when she's like this, you'll just make things worse. You need to give her space, let her cool down. Maybe then she'll decide to listen." Grayson was silent for a long moment, his breath shallow, his body trembling. What do I do? How do I fix this?" "You can't fix it right now," Lucian said firmly, his tone steady. "The best thing you can do is wait. Give her time. If you push, she'll only run further away. Grayson's shoulders sagged, defeat washing over him like a tidal wave. I don't want to lose her. I know, Lucian whispered, his voice almost tender. I know, Will. But sometimes, loving someone means giving them space, even when it hurts. There was another beat of silence, heavy and suffocating, before Grayson spoke again, his voice hollow. Okay, I'll wait. I'll give her space. Lucian's eyes gleamed with triumph, his lips curling into a satisfied smile. That's the right call, Will. Just hang in there, and if you need anything, you know I'm here for you. Thanks, Lucian, Grayson whispered, his voice broken. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what friends are for, Lucian said softly, his voice warm and comforting. We'll get through this together. He ended the call, his smile widening as he stared at his reflection in the window. Everything was falling into place. Grayson was defeated, his spirit shattered, his love for Seraphina crumbling under the weight of his own guilt. And Seraphina, she was broken, vulnerable, questioning everything she thought she knew about love and trust. It was perfect! Lucian leaned back, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He had torn them apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but doubt and pain. And now, all he had to do was wait. Because eventually, Seraphina would reach out. She would turn to him, needing comfort, needing someone who understood her pain. And when she did, he would be there, ready to pick up the pieces. He would be her savior, her rock, her everything. And Grayson would be nothing. Lucian's smile widened, his heart racing with anticipation. The game was far from over. It was just beginning. Okay, Grayson finally said, his voice hollow and defeated. I'll wait. But if you find her again, please, Lucian, tell her that I'm sorry. Tell her that I'd do anything to make this right. Of course, Lucian replied smoothly, his voice laced with false reassurance. You know I've got your back, Will. Always. When the call ended, Lucian lowered his phone, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across his face. Everything was falling into place, just as he had planned. By convincing Grayson to give Seraphina space, he had bought himself precious time to act without interference, time to weave the final strands of his plan and secure his victory. But he knew he had to be careful. Seraphina was intelligent, resilient, and fiercely independent. If he pushed too hard, if he played his hand too soon, she could slip away, and that was a risk he couldn't afford to take. He needed to shatter her trust in Grayson completely. He needed to break her heart so thoroughly that she would never look back. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Seraphina wandered aimlessly through the busy streets of New York, her body moving on autopilot, while her mind replayed every painful word, every heartbreaking revelation. Her heart was heavy, weighed down by the crushing realization that everything she thought she knew about her relationship was a lie. She thought about the nights she had stayed up, planning their future, believing in Grayson's love, fighting to be with him despite the distance and the challenges. She thought about the sacrifices she had been willing to make, the dreams she had built around a man who had never truly trusted her. Her chest tightened, anger bubbling up beneath the pain. How could he have doubted her? How could he have tested her love, orchestrated this cruel deception just to satisfy his own insecurities? Her fists clenched, her nails digging into her palms as she took a deep, steadying breath. No more tears, she whispered to herself, her voice shaking. No more pain, this ends now. She stopped at a street corner, her eyes narrowing with resolve. She had to confront Grayson. She had to show him the truth, to make him understand just how deeply he had hurt her. And then she would walk away. For good, her heart ached at the thought, her love for him battling with her anger and her sense of betrayal. But she couldn't stay, not after everything he had done, not after the way he had manipulated her, tested her, doubted her. Seraphina looked down at the folder in her hands, her fingers trembling as she tightened her grip. Inside were all the documents, the proof of everything she had done in secret to help him, to save them. Proof of her love, her loyalty, her sacrifice. Proof that she had never needed his money, that she had never been the gold digger he had feared. Let's get this over with, she muttered, her voice cold and resolute as she turned to the man standing beside her. Thank you for coming, Mr. Dominic. I need you to confirm every detail. Mr. Dominic, the man Grayson had seen at the restaurant, the man he had mistaken for a rival, nodded solemnly. "Of course, Miss Seraphina. I'm here to support you in whatever you need." Seraphina's eyes hardened, her chin lifting as she steeled herself for what was to come. "Then let's go." They climbed into the waiting cab, the ride to Grayson's mansion passing in tense, heavy silence. Seraphina stared out the window, her heart pounding as she replayed the confrontation in her head over and over until the words were seared into her mind. When they arrived, she stepped out of the car with firm, determined steps, clutching the folder against her chest like a shield. Her eyes were cold, her face expressionless as she walked up the steps to the front door. Dominic followed her, his presence steady and supportive. He carried his own folder, filled with receipts and documents, proof of every payment she had made, every effort she had taken to protect Grayson, to protect their future. Grayson was sitting in the living room, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man defeated, broken by his own mistakes. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. He looked up, his breath catching in his throat as his eyes locked on Seraphina, standing in the doorway. For a moment he thought he was hallucinating, his guilt manifesting before him. But she was real, flesh and blood, her eyes cold and distant, her body rigid with anger. "Seraphina," he breathed, his voice raw with emotion. I didn't think you'd come." Her eyes flashed with anger, her jaw tightening as she lifted her hand to silence him. "Don't speak," she commanded, her voice sharp and unyielding. "I didn't come here to listen to your excuses. I came to show you the truth. The truth you were too blind to see before you accused me, before you doubted who I was." Grayson felt his chest tighten, his heart squeezing painfully as shame flooded through him. He tried to rise, his body trembling, but the look in her eyes pinned him in place, freezing him where he stood. Seraphina stepped into the room, her movements controlled, graceful, her expression fierce and unwavering. She held the folder out in front of her, her hands steady as she spoke. "This is everything, Grayson. Everything I did, for you, for us." She tossed the folder onto the coffee table, the papers spilling out, revealing receipts, contracts, and legal documents. Grayson's eyes widened, confusion clouding his face as he looked down at the papers. What is all this?" he stammered, his voice breaking. "Proof," she said coldly, her eyes never leaving his face. "Proof that while you were busy doubting me, testing me, playing games to see if my love was real, I was fighting for us. I was trying to save us." She turned to Mr. Dominic, her voice commanding. "Tell him." Mr. Dominic stepped forward, his face solemn. "I'm a lawyer, Mr. Harrington. I've been working with Seraphina to finalize the purchase of a house she was buying for the two of you, with her own savings." Grayson's body went numb, his eyes darting back to the documents. A house? "Yes," Seraphina spat, her voice shaking with anger. "I was buying a house, Grayson. I was planning our future, while you were busy doubting me, accusing me, testing my love." Her voice broke, her eyes filling with tears. "You didn't trust me. You never did. And now you've lost me." Grayson's heart shattered, his vision blurring as he reached out for her. "Seraphina, please, I'm sorry. I never meant. I love you. I love you." She stepped back, her eyes hardening. "No, Grayson, you don't love me. You love your fears, your insecurities, your doubts. You love the idea of me, but not who I really am." She turned, her shoulders straight, her head held high. "Goodbye, Grayson," and just like that she walked out, leaving him behind in the ruins of his own making. Seraphina walked into the room with a determined stride, her shoulders squared, her head held high. In her hands, she held a folder, thick, heavy, filled with papers that bore the weight of truth. Mr. Dominic followed closely behind, his demeanor professional and respectful, his eyes filled with quiet sympathy. Grayson looked up, his heart pounding as his gaze locked on Seraphina. She looked strong, resolute, but her eyes held a pain so deep it made his chest ache. He opened his mouth to speak, to beg for forgiveness, but she cut him off with a sharp, firm voice. "Don't speak," she commanded, her voice cold and steady. "I didn't come here to listen to your excuses. I came to show you the truth you refuse to see." Grayson's mouth snapped shut, his heart sinking as she walked over to the table. She placed the folder down with a soft thud, her fingers lingering on it for a moment before she looked up, her eyes piercing and unwavering. "This is Mr. Dominic," she said, her voice clipped and professional as she gestured to the man beside her. "He's a wedding planner. We've been working together for weeks, planning our wedding, and I did it alone, Grayson. I took every penny I had saved from working in that little clothing store, every dollar I had put aside, and I paid for everything. Why? Because I love you, because I wanted it to be perfect, because I wanted to surprise you, to make you happy." Her words hit him like a blow, his chest tightening as shame washed over him. He looked at her, his heart breaking as he saw the pain in her eyes, the betrayal, the anger. "Seraphina, I didn't..." His voice faltered, his words failing him as guilt strangled him. "No," she snapped, her voice sharp and cutting. "You didn't know, because you never asked. You were too busy doubting me, testing me, manipulating me, all because you never believed in me, in us." She opened the folder, her movements precise and controlled as she pulled out a stack of papers, placing them on the table in front of him. "Here are the contracts with the suppliers. The decorations, the buffet, the flowers, the music, everything. And do you know why I was so curious about the sale of the mansion?" Her voice broke, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. "Because I wanted us to get married here, in this house, where we shared so many memories, so many happy moments. I wanted it to be the perfect ending to this chapter of your life. I wanted it to be unforgettable." Grayson's throat went dry, his hands trembling as he reached for the papers. His eyes scanned the documents, the amounts listed, the payments recorded. Every detail was there, meticulously planned, beautifully executed. She had done it all. For him. For them. His eyes flicked to Mr. Dominic, who nodded solemnly. "It's true," the wedding planner said, his voice calm and professional. "Miss Seraphina took care of everything. She was incredibly dedicated, making sure every detail was perfect. It was an honor to work with her." Grayson's heart shattered, his vision blurring as tears welled up in his eyes. He looked back at Seraphina, his chest aching, his soul breaking. She crossed her arms over her chest, her posture rigid, her face expressionless. "You don't trust me, Grayson," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You chose to test me, to deceive me, instead of believing in my love for you. You let your fears and insecurities ruin everything we had. And now there's nothing left. Seraphina, please." His voice broke, his hands shaking as he reached for her. "I'm sorry. I was scared. I was afraid of losing you. I didn't know how to trust." She took a step back, her eyes cold, her lips pressed into a thin line. "No, I'm not here to listen to excuses. I'm not here to forgive you. I came to show you who I am, so you would know exactly what you lost." Her voice cracked, her shoulders trembling as she held herself together, refusing to break. "I gave you everything, Grayson. I believed in you, in us. I fought for us. But you were too busy fighting against me, and now, it's over." Grayson's knees went weak, his body collapsing into the chair behind him as the weight of her words crashed down on him. No, please, Seraphina. Don't leave me. I love you. I love you more than anything. Please." She shook her head, her eyes filled with pain and anger. "If you loved me, you would have trusted me. You would have believed in us. But you didn't." She turned to leave, her shoulders squared, her head held high. "Goodbye, Grayson. I hope you learn to live with the consequences of your choices." She took a step toward the door, but paused, her body tense as she looked back at him, her face hardening. "You didn't just lose me today. You lost the life we could have had. And that's on you." With that, she walked out, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, strong and unwavering. Mr. Dominic followed, his eyes lingering on Grayson with a look of quiet pity. "She's an extraordinary woman, Mr. Harrington," he said softly. "Think carefully about what you've done, and what you've lost." And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Grayson sat alone in the empty room, surrounded by papers that bore the proof of her love, of her sacrifice, of her loyalty. Papers that showed just how wrong he had been. His body trembled, his chest heaving as he choked on a sob, his heart breaking into pieces. She was gone, Seraphina was gone, and he knew that he had only himself to blame. A short while later, Lucian arrived at Grayson's mansion, his face carefully arranged into an expression of concern. He found Grayson still sitting on the sofa, his shoulders slumped, his head buried in his hands. The room was dark, silent, heavy with the weight of heartbreak and regret. "Will," Lucian called out softly, his voice laced with feigned sympathy. "I heard. Seraphina's gone, hasn't she?" Grayson looked up, his eyes red and swollen, his face pale and hollow. She showed me everything she did, and I lost her, Lucian. I've lost the best thing I've ever had." His voice broke, his body trembling as the reality of his actions crushed him. "I was so stupid, so blind, how could I not see it? She was doing it all for us, and I was too busy doubting her to notice." Lucian sat down next to him, his hand resting on Grayson's shoulder in a gesture that was meant to look comforting. "I'm sorry, buddy," he murmured, his voice low and gentle. "But maybe this is for the best. Maybe you needed this time apart to figure out what you really want." Grayson didn't respond, his gaze distant, lost in the memories that replayed endlessly in his mind. The way Seraphina's eyes had filled with pain, the way her voice had cracked as she revealed the truth, the way she had looked at him, her love turning into betrayal right before his eyes. He was haunted by her words, by the finality in her voice as she walked out of his life. "I gave you everything, and you never believed in me." He wanted to scream, to beg her forgiveness, to take back every cruel word, every accusation, but it was too late. She was gone, and he had no one to blame but himself. Lucian's fingers tightened on Grayson's shoulder, his lips curving into a faint, satisfied smile. He had done it. He had shattered their relationship, torn them apart, and now Grayson was a broken shell of himself. Everything was falling into place. "I know it hurts, Will," Lucian continued, his voice dripping with false compassion. "But sometimes things happen for a reason. Maybe this is your chance to start over, to find someone who truly makes you happy." Grayson shook his head, his eyes hollow and distant. "I don't want someone else. I want Seraphina. I love her, Lucian. I love her more than anything. But she's gone, and it's my fault." His voice cracked, his body curling in on itself as the pain swallowed him whole. "I broke her heart, and now I'll never get her back." Lucian patted his back, his smile widening as Grayson sobbed, his body shaking with grief. "I'm here for you, buddy. Whatever you need, I'll be here." But inside, Lucian was celebrating. Grayson was destroyed, his spirit shattered, his heart broken beyond repair. And Seraphina? She was vulnerable, alone, ripe for the taking. He had won. The months that followed were torture for Grayson. Every day felt like an echo of the last, empty and meaningless. He threw himself into work, burying himself in meetings and projects, hoping to distract himself from the aching void that Seraphina's absence had left behind. He traveled constantly, moving from city to city, trying to outrun the memories that haunted him. But no matter where he went, he couldn't escape her face, her voice, the laughter that used to light up his world. He sent messages, dozens of them, apologizing, pleading, begging her to come back. He called her number again and again, listening to the voicemail message, his heart breaking a little more each time she didn't pick up. But she never responded, not once. Every day, Grayson woke up hoping that today would be the day she'd call, the day she'd forgive him, the day she'd come back. But that day never came, and through it all, Lucian was there. "You need to let her go, Will," he would say, his voice full of false sympathy. "You're wasting your life waiting for her. She's moved on. You should too." Grayson would shake his head, his eyes hollow, his voice empty. I can't stop loving her." Lucian would sigh, feigning frustration. "I hate to say this, but she's moved on, Will. She's living her life. You're the only one stuck in the past." The words cut Grayson like knives, his heart bleeding with every mention of Seraphina moving on. He tried to believe Lucian, tried to convince himself that she was happy without him, but the pain never went away. Meanwhile, Seraphina was struggling to rebuild her life. She tried to move on, to forget the man who had broken her heart, but the memories were always there, the love she felt for him refusing to die. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, her chest aching with loss. She would scroll through her phone, her fingers hovering over his number, tempted to call him just to hear his voice. But she never did. Lucian kept close contact, calling frequently, always pretending to be the supportive friend. "I saw Grayson today," he would tell her, his voice casual. "He seems to be doing well, traveling a lot, meeting new people. It looks like he's moving on." Every time he said it, Seraphina's heart would crack a little more. She would close her eyes, fighting back tears, forcing herself to accept that Grayson was gone, that he had gotten over her. "I'm glad," she would whisper, her voice breaking. "I want him to be happy." Lucian would nod, his voice soft and reassuring. "You did the right thing, Seraphina. It was his loss. You deserve someone who sees your worth." But behind his comforting words, Lucian's mind was calculating, his plan advancing smoothly. Grayson was drowning in guilt and regret. Seraphina was lost, heartbroken, believing that the man she loved had moved on. They were both shattered, both vulnerable. And Lucian was there, carefully pulling the strings, keeping them apart. It was perfect. Because once Seraphina accepted that Grayson was gone, she would turn to him. She would let him comfort her, let him be the one to pick up the pieces. And when she did, she would finally be his. Lucian smiled, his eyes gleaming with victory. The game was almost over, and he was the one holding all the cards. But over time, Lucian's calls became more frequent, more insistent, and increasingly invasive. He always seemed to be fishing for information, wanting to know where she was, who she was with, and how she was feeling. At first, Seraphina thought he was just being a caring friend, but as the weeks went by, his behavior started to feel suffocating. He would text her at odd hours, his messages full of seemingly casual questions that felt strangely calculated. He would suggest meeting up for coffee, for dinner, for drinks, all of which she politely refused, but he never seemed to take the hint. A sinking feeling of suspicion began to grow in her chest, a nagging voice whispering that something wasn't right. "I think he's interested in me," she realized one evening, a shiver running down her spine. "And I don't think it's just as a friend." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Grayson was falling apart. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move on. He couldn't forget the look in Seraphina's eyes, the hurt and betrayal that had shattered her trust in him. He was haunted by the memory of her tears, of her voice breaking as she walked out of his life. He tried everything, throwing himself into work, traveling constantly, burying himself in distractions, but nothing filled the emptiness inside him. Nothing eased the pain of losing her. Every day he would check his phone, hoping for a message, a call, a sign that she might be willing to give him another chance, but it never came. After months of living in agony, Grayson made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't live like this anymore, couldn't continue punishing himself for the mistake he had made. He needed to see her, to look into her eyes, to tell her the truth and beg her forgiveness. Oh, he booked a flight to Seraphina's city, his heart pounding with fear and hope. He didn't know what he would find, didn't know if she would even speak to him, but he had to try. She was the love of his life, and he couldn't walk away without fighting for her. When he arrived, he went straight to the cafe where she used to go, the one she had always talked about. He sat by the window, his hands trembling as he waited, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. Minutes passed, then an hour. He was starting to lose hope, to fear that she wouldn't come, that he had missed his chance. But then, as if fate had intervened, Seraphina walked through the door. She froze in the entrance, her eyes widening in shock as she saw him sitting there. "Grayson?" she whispered, her voice a mix of surprise and caution. He stood up, his heart breaking as he took in her face, her eyes still filled with the pain he had caused. "Seraphina, please, give me 5 minutes. That's all I need, just 5 minutes to explain everything." She hesitated, her body tense, her guard up, but something in his eyes, something raw and broken, made her agree. "All right, 5 minutes." They sat at a table in the corner, away from the noise and the crowd. Grayson took a deep breath, his chest tight with fear and regret. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I let my insecurities get the best of me. I let someone get inside my head, make me doubt you, doubt us. I thought if I tested your love, I would finally feel secure. I thought it would protect me from getting hurt." Seraphina's eyes were hard, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You should have trusted me. You should have believed in me." "I know," Grayson said, his voice breaking. "I know that now. I was a fool. I was scared. But I wasn't alone in this. Someone planted the doubt. Someone convinced me to test you." He looked down, shame flooding him. "Lucian. He's the one who insisted on the idea. He said he was worried about me, that he wanted to make sure you weren't with me for the wrong reasons." At the mention of Lucian's name, Seraphina's face changed. Her eyes widened, her body stiffening. "Lucian? He's the one who convinced you to do this?" Grayson nodded, confusion flickering across his face as he saw the change in her expression. "Yes, he kept telling me that I needed to be sure, that I couldn't afford to make a mistake. He made it sound so reasonable, so logical. I was stupid, I trusted him, and I hurt you because of it." Seraphina went silent, her mind racing as the pieces began to fall into place. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving quickly as she opened her message history. She handed the phone to Grayson, her voice low and steady. "Look at this." Grayson's eyes widened as he scrolled through the dozens of messages, his face growing pale as he read the words. Lucian's texts were filled with subtle manipulations, gentle but persistent nudges to make her believe that Grayson had moved on. "Grayson is fine," one message read. "He's traveling, meeting new people. It looks like he's getting over it. Maybe it's time for you to move on too. He's been busy. I think he's accepted that it's over. You deserve someone who values you. Grayson is living his life, and you should too." Grayson's hands shook as he read the messages, his face twisting with anger and disbelief. He told you that I was okay? That I was over you?" "Yes," Seraphina replied, her voice trembling with fury. "All the time. Every time I started to feel strong enough to reach out to you, he would call. He would tell me how well you were doing, how happy you were. He said you were moving on with your life, that you didn't want me anymore." Grayson's chest tightened, his heart pounding with rage. "He lied. He lied to you, to both of us. He was trying to keep us apart." Seraphina's eyes were cold, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I see it now. He was playing both sides, pretending to be my friend, pretending to be yours, but all he did was manipulate us, destroy us." Grayson's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening as the truth sank in. "I trusted him. I believed him. He said he was worried about me, that he wanted to protect me. But all along he was trying to tear us apart." Seraphina looked at him, her eyes fierce and unwavering. "We let him win. We let him ruin us. But I won't let him control me anymore." Grayson's eyes softened, his voice breaking. "Seraphina, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have protected us. I should have believed in us." She looked down, her shoulders trembling. "I don't know if we can ever get back what we lost, Grayson, but now we know the truth." Grayson reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "Then let's fight. Let's fight for us, for the love he tried to destroy." For the first time in months, hope flickered in Seraphina's eyes. "Together? Together," Grayson vowed, his eyes burning with determination. "We'll face him, and we'll make him pay." Grayson felt anger boiling inside him, his chest tightening with every word that came out of Lucian's mouth. He gripped Seraphina's phone so tightly his knuckles turned white, his jaw clenched with rage, his entire body was tense, vibrating with the need to confront the man who had orchestrated this nightmare. Seraphina kept her composure, her voice soft and vulnerable, her performance flawless. "You're right, Lucian. Maybe it's time to leave Grayson in the past. He's moved on, hasn't he?" Lucian's laugh was light, almost jubilant. "Oh yes, Seraphina. He's doing great. He's been traveling a lot, living his life. In fact, I think he's in the Caribbean right now, with a new girlfriend. They look very happy together." Grayson's blood ran cold, his fists tightening as fury surged through him. He felt like he'd been punched in the gut, his heart pounding with betrayal and anger. His breathing grew heavy, his chest rising and falling as he fought to contain himself. Seraphina saw his reaction and quickly reached out, placing a steadying hand on his arm. Her eyes locked with his, silently urging him to stay calm. They were so close to exposing Lucian, so close to finally revealing the truth. She took a deep breath, her voice soft and trembling. "I see. Maybe I should try to move on too?" Lucian's voice grew eager, his excitement almost palpable. I think that's the best thing you could do, Seraphina. In fact, I was thinking, maybe we should go back to Greece. Just the two of us? We could start again. We could have what we were meant to have from the beginning, just you and me." The words hung in the air like poison, echoing through the room. Grayson's vision blurred, his body shaking with rage as the truth sank in. Lucian had never been his friend. He had never been on his side. This had all been a calculated, manipulative plan to steal Seraphina away. Before he could stop himself, Grayson grabbed his own phone and held it close to his mouth, his voice low and dangerous. "Lucian." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Lucian's voice came through, shaky and confused. "Will, what's going on?" Grayson's eyes were cold, his voice dripping with fury. "You're a bastard. I heard everything, every damn word." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a tense, panicked silence. Lucian's voice was a stammer when he finally spoke. "Will, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you dare lie to me," Grayson growled, his anger barely contained. "You lied to me, you lied to Seraphina, you planted doubts in my head, you made me question her love, you manipulated both of us. All so you could have her for yourself." I was just trying to help," Lucian sputtered, his voice cracking. "I was worried about you, Will. I thought she was just after your money. I wanted to protect you." Grayson let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Protect me? By feeding me lies? By convincing me to test her love? By filling her head with stories about me moving on? About me being with someone else? You weren't protecting me, Lucian. You were destroying me." Seraphina's eyes were blazing with anger, her body rigid as she listened to the man who had manipulated her, who had made her question everything. She leaned in, her voice cold and unyielding. "You pretended to be my friend, Lucian. You pretended to care, but all you did was lie to me, to both of us." Lucian's voice wavered, his confidence crumbling. "Seraphina, I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to be there for you. I wanted to help you move on." "Move on?" Grayson's voice was icy, his anger palpable. "You mean you wanted her to move on? With you? You wanted her for yourself? That's what this was all about, wasn't it? You wanted to break us apart so you could take my place." No, it's not like that," Lucian stammered, his voice growing desperate. I just wanted her to be happy. You were miserable, Will. I thought it was for the best." Grayson's grip tightened on the phone, his body shaking with rage. "You're a coward, Lucian. A manipulative, lying coward. You broke us apart. You made me doubt the woman I love. You made her believe I had moved on, that I didn't care. You destroyed everything. Will, please. I didn't mean. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Grayson's voice was deadly calm, his eyes blazing with fury. "You were protecting yourself, protecting your chance with her. You were never my friend. You were a snake, waiting to strike the moment I let my guard down." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. When Lucian spoke again, his voice was small, defeated. I never meant for it to go this far." "But it did," Grayson spat, his voice cold and unforgiving. "And now, you're going to live with the consequences." Seraphina took the phone from Grayson, her face hard, her voice cold. "Stay away from me, Lucian. Stay away from us. I never want to see you again." She ended the call, her body trembling as she threw the phone down on the table. She looked at Grayson, her eyes filled with pain and anger. He did this to us. He ruined everything. Grayson took her hands, his voice low and full of regret. "No, Seraphina, I did this. I let him manipulate me. I let him turn me against you. I was weak, and I let him destroy us." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with tears. "You should have trusted me. You should have believed in us." "I know," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I know, and I hate myself for it. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. If you'll let me." Seraphina's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving her body as she leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. "We've lost so much because of him." Grayson wrapped his arms around her, his body shaking as he held her close. "But we can get it back. We can rebuild. Together." She closed her eyes, her body sinking into his embrace. Together, and for the first time in months, Grayson felt hope. They would face Lucian. They would rebuild what he had tried to destroy. Together. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Grayson retorted, his voice cold and unyielding. You were the worst friend anyone could ever have. I trusted you, Lucian. I believed you had my back, and all you did was stab me in it. You tried to break us up, you played us against each other, and you manipulated me into hurting the woman I love. Well, congratulations, because now we know exactly who you are. His words were like knives, sharp and cutting, leaving no room for doubt. On the other end of the line, Lucian's silence was deafening, his betrayal laid bare, his lies unraveling before him. Before Lucian could reply, before he could spew another excuse, Grayson ended the call, his fingers trembling as he threw the phone on the table. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his breathing ragged as he fought to control the anger boiling inside him. He felt sick, his body vibrating with fury and hurt. He had trusted Lucian, his oldest friend, the one he had thought was like a brother, and Lucian had destroyed everything. Seraphina watched him in silence, her eyes softening as she saw the pain in his face, the guilt in his eyes. She knew he was hurting, knew he was punishing himself for letting Lucian manipulate him, for letting him destroy what they had built together. Slowly she walked over to him, her footsteps light and gentle. She reached out, her fingers curling around his hand, her touch warm and steady. "Grayson," she whispered, her voice soft and soothing. "I was deceived too, but now we know the truth." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, his gaze heavy with sorrow and regret. "I'm so sorry, Seraphina. For everything. For letting him get inside my head, for letting him poison what we had. I should have trusted you from the start. I should have believed in us." His voice broke, his body trembling as he tried to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. "I was weak, I was a fool, and I hurt you. I hurt you in the worst possible way, and I don't know if you'll ever forgive me." Seraphina's eyes shimmered with tears, her lips trembling as she squeezed his hand. "We both made mistakes, Grayson. I should have fought harder for us. I should have trusted you enough to confront you instead of running away." She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing as a small, tentative smile appeared on her face. "But maybe we can start again. No Lucian, no lies, just you and me. Just us." Grayson stared at her, his heart aching with love and gratitude. You'd give me another chance? After everything I did? After everything I said? You'd still want me? Her smile widened, her eyes softening as she moved closer, her body pressing against his as she wrapped her arms around him. "I never stopped wanting you. I never stopped loving you. Even when it hurt, even when I thought you were gone, my heart never let you go." Grayson's body sagged with relief, his arms tightening around her as he pulled her close, his face burying in her hair as his body shook with emotion. I love you so much, Seraphina, and I swear, I'll never doubt you again. I'll never let anyone come between us again." "I know," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "I believe you." They held each other tightly, their bodies molding together, their hearts beating in sync. For the first time in months, they felt whole, complete, at peace, and then their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, gentle and hesitant, a question, a promise, a whisper of hope. But then it deepened, their mouths moving together with urgency, with need, with the hunger of two souls finding each other again after being torn apart. They poured all their pain, all their forgiveness, all their love into that kiss, letting it heal the wounds that Lucian had inflicted, letting it rebuild the trust that had been shattered. When they finally pulled apart, their foreheads resting against each other, their breaths mingling, Grayson cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "We get a second chance, Seraphina, and I swear, I won't waste it. I won't lose you again." Her eyes sparkled with hope, her smile radiant as she whispered, "Then let's make it count." And in that moment they knew they had found something rare and precious, something worth fighting for, a second chance, together. The message I want to leave you with today is that trust is a precious gift, one that should never be given lightly. It's a delicate thread that binds hearts and souls together, a foundation upon which love, friendship, and loyalty are built. But trust is also fragile, easily shattered by deceit and betrayal. That's why it's important to choose wisely. Don't give your trust to just anyone. Observe the actions of the people around you. Listen to your heart, but don't let it blind you to the truth. Watch how they treat you, how they speak about others, and how they behave when no one is watching. True character is revealed in the smallest of actions. But don't let fear keep you from trusting those who truly deserve it. Don't let past hurts close you off from the people who want to love and support you. The relationships we build on trust are the ones that lift us up, that give us strength when we are weak, that remind us that we are never alone. In the end, trust is a risk, but it's a risk worth taking when it's given to the right person. So guard your heart, but don't lock it away. Learn to trust again. Learn to forgive. And above all, learn to recognize the people who are worthy of your trust, because they're the ones who will stand by you no matter what. After all, the relationships built on trust are the ones that not only strengthen us, but also help us grow into the best versions of ourselves.